nowadays, as you know, there is a mandatory requirement by the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change to undergo an environmental clearance process for real estate projects as well. We had it initially for industries, but now we have it for our residential, commercial and institutional projects if they have a square footage area of more than 20,000 square meters. And one of the requirements that this environmental committee looks at is the open space. And as you know, 10% mandatory open space is what any development control rule or any other town planning rules gives you. And that's what right now is really the scope that the environmental clearance committee is looking at. So they look at whether the 10% open space is because it's mandatory, whether it is completely free from any encumbrances. So you cannot build a clubhouse or a pathway or anything for that matter on this 10% open space. It needs to be on virgin land. So you cannot have, for example, an underground water storage tank or a podium and then a landscape on top of that is again not considered as it cannot be a part of that 10% open space. They look at the overall quality of space that you are creating for the people. And here again, like Swati mentioned, it is about the people, which is really the focus despite it being an environmental committee, but it is because the project is for the people, they obviously assume that the landscape is only for the people, and hence the usability is checked at a little bit, perhaps a little bit of discussion happens on that. And as you know, most of these environmental clearance projects in the country happen on a one-on-one hearing. So there is a technical scrutiny committee which sits, you present your project in front of them, you present it through an accredited consultant like myself, and based on what the technical scrutiny asks you to do, you have to revise your project, go back to them after a deliberative process of about 3 to 4 months minimum. You finally end up getting the clearance. They also look at a little bit on the number of trees and the types of trees that are being proposed. So yes, of course, indigenous trees are definitely looked at by one of the members of the committee, and they try to promote indigenous species, try to look at restricting the invasive species. If the site already has existing trees, they definitely try and appeal to the developer to try and retain those trees. Of course, we have to go out to them with a proper ecological report, and we have been, through my company, we have been insistent to all the developers that we get an ecological report done, especially if it is not a very core urban site. So, if it's a very core urban site in Sadashivpet, Pune, then having an ecological report done is almost futile because it's almost a brownfield site. But anywhere just outside the city, semi-urban, rural areas, we ask all the developers to undergo an ecological assessment for these projects, which gives us the potential for trees conservation. It gives us it gives an idea as to what actually exists around the site and possibly can guide landscape. So this is how a typical MOEF presentation slide looks like. So as you can see, there is a central open space. That is that mandatory, you'll see a slightly thicker polygon line. And then the clubhouse is shown just outside that 10% to show that there is no encumbrance on the precious 10% that unfortunately or fortunately the Supreme Court also has a decree on it. So hence this has to be followed to the T. And then there is some peripheral landscape which really is small strips of land which just contribute as space for trees, but nothing really in terms of its usage. Again, another site here which shows kind of landscape areas, and then format of, for example, how calculations need to be done is also fixed by this technical scrutiny. So all this needs to be given. Here I just wanted to highlight, and I'm going to plunge into this topic a little later, but projects like this are a little bit of a concern to me, and I'll come to that later. Is, as you can see here, this is a large site. There is a water reservoir here. It's a naturally made one by this factory here. And there is this small depression which is a natural stream. And in the project, you don't see it at all. So this is something that the committee completely misses out. So they are looking at the mandatory open spaces. Yes, calculations are all there, but this feature is completely lost. So, just before the session also, I was just speaking about this, that how to bring this sensitivity into and subjectivity into the environmental committee of the government is really the tricky part right now. And like I said, landscape planning is obviously much more than doing landscape design on a 10% open space, right? I mean, all of this audience is going to agree. And as more and more projects are coming outside the city, today I think I have more than 75 to 80 projects which are on the fringe of the city where we are going in for environmental clearance. These are along beautiful sites along the Manas Lake, for example, or they are just at the edge of Saswad, where again there is a beautiful forest, reserved forest. And what is happening is that we, for environmental clearance as well, we are assuming that this site, which is now under the ownership of the developer, is cut off by a boundary, and that whatever comes inside is what I need to think about. And because it's an environmental feature, obviously it goes out, it comes in first from somewhere else and goes out again from by site, which unfortunately the larger picture is being completely missed out. So here are just a few glimpses of how landscape architects can really contribute to this whole process of better environmental scrutiny as well as better environmental planning, even when projects are, for example, I go on a particular site and it's almost heart-wrenching to realize, to come to an understanding that this is going to get completely converted into residential housing blocks. But well, yes, we also need housing on the other side, so it is going to happen, but can we not do it in a better way? And I think landscape architects play a very, very crucial role, and unfortunately they are the last to come inside on that project. So once all the buildings are planned, everything is done, the periphery is given to the landscape architect, saying that this is where now you are given space to plant the trees. And that's why some of these projects I'm trying to highlight how we insisted that the landscape architect needs to be in the picture much before the actual planning, or rather the execution of the basic design. And I take that privilege of being an accredited consultant, because developers can't go in front of the committee without me. So I sometimes take this extraordinary advantage and put my foot down, saying that I will not face the committee if you don't do ecological assessment for this site. I will not face the committee if there is no landscape architect or besides me who is going to try and answer some of these questions. So I've tried to do that. It's almost like an emotional blackmail, but I end up getting my way. Fragmentation of landscape, it is a very, very commonly observed design fallacy today, especially in fact when you're doing large projects. There is a potential right now for you to think about a cumulative landscape space, whereas you end up doing designs like this. And at least, I would say that there is some largish space that has come up here, but really this breaking up of landscape spaces into very small parcels just defeats the whole purpose. And if it's a small plot of land, it is understandable, but for large projects, and I think if a landscape architect was here, possibly this could have been averted. Similarly, you will see here, you see most of the project is looking green, but if you actually go into the scale of each of these spaces, these are really very tiny spaces. And actually it's, once all the buildings come up, the green would be almost lost, because most of these buildings here are going to be at least 14 to 18 stories high. So in that scale, these spaces are going to be almost negligible. Here again, we convinced the developer. This was one of the projects at Jhendewadi, very close to Saswad, a very, very sensitive site. On this side, there is a reserved forest. So this is where we really asked that without a landscape architect, we will not present to the environmental committee. And here, at least we got, a highly contoured part of the site, completely kept for landscape, and then most of the buildings got shifted on this side. This was not the original plan. You had buildings all over. So we could manage that. Plus, I will also share, anecdote about this stream as well later. Yeah. So, like I told you before, on the plan, this looks okay, But just see how once the height of the building, and now this is the actual view, you've almost lost the whole landscape. So, you know, on plan it may look like you're giving quite a lot of landscape space, but it ends up as almost being negligible. Planning with contours. You know, in most of the conceptual plans, even in my fraternity, which is the architectural fraternity, I see very little sensitivity for contours. And this is a place where landscape architects can, like Swati said, synthesize an understanding of contours much better than architects, because they are not limited by the rules of FSI. You know, that is a significant difference between, though, you know, the B-arch has been common, the landscape architect necessarily doesn't talk about FSI, and hence the understanding and synthesizing of the contours can become much better through a landscape architect. So here, as you can see, this was the stream that was existing on site. And we convinced this particular developer not to touch that stream, but to keep it as we could see it in Nanded city to a certain extent. Of course, when it comes here, it is almost sort of, you know, it sort of comes inside and then joins it back again. So in this portion, we had to change the thing. But keeping highly contoured areas untouched is something that we tried to promote on this project. Here again in one project, this was the highly contoured site, and then after this there is the hill. So we convinced the client to sort of have a design where high density development is on the lower side, and then very low rise and you know, low density is on the contour, so that at least there is some level of retention of the contours that happens here. Just quick examples of how contours can be integrated. You know, high contoured areas can be a heaven for landscape architects. In fact, you know, it's a feature which can enhance the overall project, but it is often lost at the expense of building buildings. Water flows. This is a completely neglected area, because when I actually go and buy the parcel of land, there is no monsoon. I don't understand how the water is going to flow here. The architect makes a plan without understanding that there are minor, you know, depressions, contours, and where the water is actually going to run during the monsoons. And here again you see a classic example of a very nice depression here, a nala here, so many water flows crisscrossing, and yet the project really doesn't address that at all. Though we managed to sort of have this stream in a particular way retained on that particular project. Here again, here you will see a beautiful nala. In one of the previous presentations, we saw that this nala is also channelized by the Pune Municipal Corporation. So this is that nala, and all you see is a road next to it. So, you know, how to really integrate these natural features inside such kind of very high density residential development is a challenge, and I think, you know, non-involvement of landscape architect is a problem here. Here again, the river. Right next to the river, the mandatory buffer space is left, and then the rest of the building, the plan is such that it has no context to whether it's near the river or not near the river, right? So this kind of a plan could have been anywhere. So this insensitivity is very, very evident, and most of the calculations for such projects happen only on the FSI. Conservation of natural and historical elements, of course, on site has been done by architects previously, very, very difficult to achieve in urban areas. But a resort in Goa, for example, Dean de Cruz, he did not touch even a single tree on the site, and actually ended up building a beautiful resort. You know, building in Hyderabad where the natural element of stone was kept intact, a banyan tree around which the building was built. So such kind of projects, examples are there. Environmental sensitivity through landscape elements. So bioswales, for example, we have been promoting bioswales a lot, because you need not always channelize something to carry your water flows. You need not put them below the ground. Grass pavers also something that we are promoting. Spaces between the buildings or courtyard spaces, how they can be better treated is something that we work on. Corridors, podium and terrace gardens. Thank you.